My total watch time hours is my total watch time hours is my my total watch time hours my total watch time hours is 0.8 my total watch time hours. Martin had even realized he'd fallen asleep until he began to wake up again. He ground quietly and curled up, not waiting to return to full consciousness. He wasn't ready to face really quite yet. He was utterly drained. His entire body felt as if it had been hollowed out. Maybe it was the jet lag. More likely it was the shock of what had happened. His arms and shoulders were aching, and his mouth was dry. What had woken him? Oh yes, I and his oh yes, and in his jacket pocket just to add to his troubles, he was being robbed. Matt opened his eyes and saw a dark-haired boy leaning over him. At the same time, the boy's own eyes widened in alarm. Matt cried out and pushed the boy away. The boy had been crunching on his heels. He lost his balance and fell over backwards. Matt sprung to his feet. Get out, me! Get off me! He shouted. Who are you? Leave me alone. The boy said nothing. Of course, it was unlikely that he spoke a word of English. Matt looked down at him, and despite everything that had happened and all the confusion in his mind, he thought he knew him. It seemed to Matt that they had met long ago, but when he remembered in the car on the way from the airport, he was the boy who had been juggling at the traffic lights, who had sworn at them, no acá nada, solo interba ayudarte. The boy said he was protesting his innocence, but Matt didn't believe him. It was there in his eyes, deep brown and suspicious in the way he held himself, like a concord animal, as if he was going to lash out at any moment. The boy was all bone. He was all bone. If Matt grabbed hold of his arm, he was fairly sure his thumbs and fingers would meet. He was wearing a yellow t-shirt that advertised a drink called Inca Cola, but the words had faded and the fabric had worn away into holes. His jeans were disgusting, tied with a piece of rope around the wrist. He was wearing sandals made of black rubber. The boy stood up and brushed himself down as if the action could remove months of accumulated dirt. When he looked briefly at Matt, no, he tormented nada. He showed his empty hands to make the point he hadn't taken anything. Matt felt in his pockets. He'd had £10 when he came from England. Unfortunately, he had kept it in his trousers. It was still there. His passport was still in his jacket. that was something anywhere. The boy was looking at him with injured pride, as if to say, "How can you possibly mistrust me?" But Matt was sure that if he slept on the foot. 30 seconds, he would have woken up with nothing. He looked around. He had been sitting slumped against a low brick wall beneath a tattered post advertising mobile phones. The wasteland that he had crossed was in front of him, with a row of partly built houses on the other side. All the buildings looked as if they had been cut in half with a knife. Wires and metal poles sprouted out where the roofs should have been. It was still dark, the area lit by ugly arc lumps curving out of concrete posts. But the first grey fingers of the morning light were already creeping through the sky. Matt glanced at his watch. It wasn't there. The boy shuffled uneasily. "I don't suppose you've got the time?" he asked. The boy held out his hand. Matt's watch was on his wrist. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Matt didn't even try to take the watch back. He was a little surprised that the boy hadn't run off and abandoned him. Perhaps he was so curious and forgiving. Trust tourists lost in a city, and one who was about his own age. Perhaps he could see a chance to make more money. It was possible that he might come in useful, even if he was a thief. After all, he was driven. He knows the city. It was time to think. Matt had to get back in contract with an ecstasy, and in particular with Febin, who must be searching for him even now. The trouble was nobody counted on Richard and Matt being separated. Richard had money and credit cards. He had phone numbers for reaching Fairbairn day or night, but he hadn't given them to Matt. Apart from the £10, Matt had nothing. Perhaps he could work out how to use directory queries. He might be able to get a number for Susan Ashwood back home in Manchester, but even that seemed complicated and somehow unlikely. How about the police? That was the obvious choice. All through Matt doubted that the some boy would be too keen to show him the way to the nearest station. Perhaps he could find his way to Carroll, the suburb where Fabian lived. It couldn't be too far from here. Then Matt remembered what the driver Alberto had said. Fabian was waiting for him at a hotel. What was his name? It took Matt a few moments to get his brain back into gear. The Hotel Europa, that was it. The Hotel Europa in Malefolis. The boy was still waiting for him to say something. Matt tapped himself on the chest. Matt, he said. There was no point in hiding behind a false name now. So that was what he called, and the strange thing was that Matt knew his name before he said it. Could he have heard it when he was asleep. Do you know the hotel Europe in Malay floors? He asked. Pedro looked blank. Matt tried again, more slowly. Hotel Europa. He pointed to himself. I go to Hotel Europa this time. Pedro got it, sir. Subscribe, hit the bell, share, like, thank you. Click on main screen on my thumbnail. Share, like, thank you. Subscribe. What's my videos from start to finish? Click on thumbnail. Instagram, subscribe, click the bell. Share. Click on main screen thumbnail. Share, like, thank you.